Let's just ignore the medication I put there. Today we are doing a painting tutorial stream. I'm going to teach you the basics of painting miniatures. It's going to be a thing. I probably should have put some of this stuff away before I hit record. So there are a couple models I want to paint up today. Unfortunately, we don't have time to paint our beautiful maple here. So let's put her to the side. Now, I want to grab a couple models to paint. So let's go here and pick... no, let's go with Dusty. Let's paint Dusty. Dusty's already primed. Let's grab a random Space Marine. Here we go. Now, where are... I want to use one for just generic humans, and luckily I do have some models set aside just for that. Is this it? Yes, we do. We got some Last of Us miniatures we can use. Derp. But I'm gonna upload this to Starsmadas, hopefully. So let us also, you know, let's pull this guy out just for reference. Hi there, we're doing a painting tutorial of sorts. I have a spaceship here somewhere we can paint. This is my Jaeger. Now what else do we need? We've got an alien, some humans, humies, a spaceship. That should be good enough for the stream, especially because we only have an hour. Alright, now, when painting, you will notice that there is, there are flecks of paint on this table. Now, there are three things to account for when you are painting that are going to get messy. And you know what? Let's just pull this over here. So I've got my paint cup, my water cup. I've actually put a lot of this stuff away. This is just filled with a bit of primer, don't worry about it. But I want to talk about this. So this here is a little plastic tray. It was from X-Wing. It was part of what stored the models. You can use anything for this. A paper plate works well. The purpose of this is when I'm painting a miniature, just pretend I'm painting a miniature, when I set it down, it's there. And you might not think that there will be much runoff from your mini, but yes, over time, like the first 2 times you paint, there's not going to be much of anything on this. But over time, this will get covered in paint. So it's very important to have a surface to put your wet paints on. And also, when you're painting it by drip or spray, and see how this is covered in speckles, that helps protect it too. My table was originally just black. It's not very visible here, but there's actually lots of speckles of paint. Just small things mostly. In the future, I'll try to probably protect this, but this is a custom, like this is a hobby table, so I'm fine with this getting dirty. I would suggest laying down a cup, like a sheet of cardboard, because when you dry brush or do a couple other things, sometimes a fine little spray of paint will come out. And when that happens, you want to have a surface that will not be ruined. And I want to let you know, a single sheet of newspaper is not really enough to protect surfaces, because newspaper lets water through it pretty easily. Now, I think the best surface to work with is probably a cheap canvas you can get at Walmart. Look at that. You can just put it down on the table and it will catch most of the little splatters. So you lay that down, and that should protect your table, and as an added bonus, you'll end up with a piece of modern art. Oh, yes, you also need a palette. Now, for me, I like to use a paper plate that has that thin wax covering on it, because that makes it pretty much paint proof. This is actually a pretty thick layer of paint. So this is my mixing palette. Looks terrible, but it's a work of art in itself. Now, Sat just got here, so I'm going to give a very quick recap of what I just told Bognasticator. You want 3 surfaces when you're painting. You want your, well, there's also the cloth for your brush, but we'll get to that later. Number 1, your mixing palette. This is where you drop your paints and dip your stuff in. Number 2, your tray. This can also be a paper plate. It can be a Tupperware lid. The idea is the object you are painting, when you put it down, you want it to set on top of this. Because the rims, it will drip, and it might not seem like that big of an issue, but over like all this time painting, you can see that yes, paint does accumulate. So you want to put this down to protect your surface. You can also alternatively do it on top of your palette, but you don't want to set your miniature in the palette because that might get the miniature wet. Finally, there's the base surface. My table is covered in little speckles of paint. It's too late to save. But in the future, I would probably use something like a sheet of cardboard or this very large... Here, let me just hold it up. This is a very large sheet of paint canvas. You can get these cheap at, like, you can get them at dollar stores sometimes, maybe not this big, but you can get them at Walmart. And it's just a flat surface, so whenever you're painting, because if you paint and dry brush, it sometimes flicks tiny dollops of paint. So by putting that down underneath your setup, it will help protect your table. Now, funny enough, that splash zone includes my computer monitor that I'm streaming from. So I actually have to wash my computer monitor every now and then because paint actually accumulates on it. Sometimes, if I'm painting and I'm not using my computer, I'll actually cover the screen up with a cloth to make sure that doesn't happen. But when I'm streaming, no. So, that is the recap done. You need 3 surfaces. You need a base surface that should be protected. 1 sheet of newspaper is not really enough. Newspaper is easy to leak through. You should have a tray, and then you should have a palette, usually a paper plate, in my opinion. Now, I've picked 4 models to paint today. 2 of them are primed. That is, Dusty has been primed in a mixture of red blue paint and then primer. We have this black primed Jaeger class starship from Deep Space Nine. Then I kind of green stuff merged together out of an Intrepid class and a Maquis Raider. Then I just grabbed this Terminator Space Marine. He has not been primed. And I grabbed Frank from The Last of Us. Everyone's favorite character, Frank. Anyway, this way I can show you how to paint regular people. Because otherwise it's like, because I'm doing this tutorial partly for my YouTube channel, so I haven't made content for my Star Trek YouTube channel in forever, so I thought, you know what, let's paint up this model. I really want to get my Terminids done, so I can do that special Space Hulk-esque game. May as well do this guy too. But this one is sort of a teaching model, because Sat's got some, Kulmasi Username got some D&D miniatures, and this is probably the closest to them. I actually have a few others that need to be painted, but I only really have an hour to do this video, so we're going to try and keep this fast. Now, I do have some primer that's been pre-mixed. This is my Terminator primer, so it's pink. Not Terminator. Terminid primer is pink, so I'm not going to use that right now. Instead, I am going to get some of my gray primer. Now, there are different types of primer you can get. You can get thick brush-on primer. You can get thin brush-on primer, and then you can get spray-on primer. Spray-on primer is one of my favorites, but I want to really slow down when I do this hobby, so I've been sticking to brush-on primer. Now, this primer is actually very, very thin, so when I spray it, I can't really pour it onto my tray because it will spill everywhere. That's why I use a cup. But this cup right now is full with another mixture, so I'm going to grab a different cup. And I find what works great for cups, yes, I have a second tray, is the caps to either medicine caps or, best of all, pop bottle caps, water bottle caps. So let's see if I can find a water bottle cap or something. I know I have a couple. I have one specifically for washes. Ah, here we go. So this is my wash cap. I put washes in it, and this one I usually use for primer, but I also sometimes use it for oh, will you look at that? It just came right off. This is Army Painter Speed Paint. Alright, so we're going to spray some primer in this, and we are going to paint, well, we're going to prime these two guys. Now, priming, unless you want it to be also a base coat, does not have to be nice. It can be sloppy. It can be semi-transparent, and that is fine, because it is simply a foundation that makes paint stick to stuff better. Ow! Let's get some paintbrushes, shall we? I have a few paintbrushes. Some of these were freebies. Some of them came with starter kits that were like the freebie starter kit brushes. Some of those are good, some of those are terrible. I think the Citadel starter brush, I'm gonna be honest, horrible. Now, just because, I'll repeat to you something a bunch of people online have told me, and that is, cheap brushes and expensive brushes degrade at the same speed. So if you are starting out painting, you won't know how to use a expensive brush properly. So just use cheap brushes when you start out, because it's a waste to use expensive brushes. Because by the time you get good at this, the expensive brush will have degraded. Now, I don't actually throw away my old busted up brushes, because I find, depending on how they get busted up, like depending on how they get solidified, they can become new paint tools. This is one of my favorite brushes. It's ruined. It's just a semi-flexible fine point. It's not supposed to be a semi-flexible fine point, but turns out that's really good for fine details. Now, I'm gonna grab a bushy brush. I'm not gonna use this giant bushy brush. We're gonna use a medium-sized bushy brush. And we're gonna prime these two models real quick. But I also need a napkin to dry my brushes on. And I have an old one here. I thought I had more napkins laying around. I probably wiped my face on it when I was eating a snack. Alright. I'm gonna use this napkin. And this brush. So I have here a miniature holder. I'm not going to use this for the first model I primed because I want to show you, because you probably don't have one. So it doesn't really matter. So I'm just, can I zoom in? Can I zoom in? Let's zoom in. I'm talking really fast, by the way. I know, I apologize. I'm talking really fast because I only have an hour to make this video, because I should really go to bed around 10, because I have been really exhausted at work and it's affecting my job performance. And that includes being a little more snippy with people, and I don't like being rude to people. I'm a polite Canadian. Even if they deserve it, I don't want to be rude to them. Okay, this brush has become a pointy brush. It's degraded so much it's become sort of a physical point. That means it's good for detail work, bad for surface coating. You know what? Let's take one of my newer brushes. Let's take my garbage Citadel brush, because I cut it up and now it's super wide, which means it's going to give me excellent coverage for putting on this primer. Also, the music you are hearing is Mystica Izakaya's soundtrack. Now that I am done doing all the fancy-smancy talking and professional part of my video, we can get to the casual side of things. How's everyone's day going? Do we have any new video games to talk about? Any chicken adventures? I thought someone was stealing my identity, and I think someone might actually be stealing my identity. I'm gonna have to contact some people and do a little bit of sleuthing and investigating to find out if that's true or not. The good news is they have not stolen my money yet, if they are. Bad news is, I mean, they may have stolen my identity. But, I don't even like that name, so... Well, I mean, I actually do like my dead name. But I changed it for tradition's sake. Because honestly, I'll probably keep my dead name as a middle name. Anyway, you know what? That's a weird conversation to have right now when I'm speed priming. You might notice, I'm doing this quick. Because it really doesn't matter, it's priming. Now, something that does happen sometimes when I'm priming is if there is a tiny hole in the model, like let's say a bow and arrow, or a weapon strap, or like a backpack, or a belt, something that creates a little hole like this. See that? I don't know if you can see it. Can I turn on the lamp? Oh, not that one. Not evil mode. There we go. So yeah, you see how there's this little pipe that connects his arm to this power cable? Sometimes when applying upon primer, if it's really thick, it will fill in that gap. That's why in some of my painting streams, you'll see me blowing on a model. That's to blow the paint out of that gap, because if it dries like that as a primer, that will be sort of semi-solidified, and it will ruin that nice little detail. And quite a few of my models, I put the primer on in such a way, or even just layer thick coats afterwards that filled in these gaps, meaning that detail was kind of lost, because, I mean, I paid for that hole to be there. Alright, so this one is primed. Notice that it is not an even coat. It's splotchy. You can see gaps in it. I mean, it's full coverage, pretty much, but it's not, like, you can see streaks and everything like that. That doesn't really matter unless you're going for something perfect. Because, again, this is a foundation. And I prefer my paints a little on the thicker side. My biggest complaint with Citadel paints is how thin they are. So, now I've got this guy on the stand. Okay, ooh, we've got some text. Chicken Adventures, but it's kind of gross. Oh. I started Metrovadia, set in a space station incubating a fungal god. How is that different from Metroid? I'm joking. Okay, so you're not going to go into detail about chicken drama. Thank you. Yes, yeah, no. I got a cut on my leg, and it reminds me a bit of the cut on what's-his-face's leg. Ultrois, the art style is rad. Nice, okay. So now we're going to quickly prime this. Now, depending on what primer you use, it can dry pretty fast. Now, sometimes it doesn't dry fast. And then you end up with a problem if you're trying to paint something and you have wet primer. That might happen today because we're doing this real quick. And if that is the case, then I will show you how to paint over wet primer. And it's ill-advisable, but sometimes you only have so many hours in a day and you want to have a miniature painted, and by George, you're going to paint that miniature. So if we have to paint over these wet models, so be it. Alright, so I'm going to set these guys up top to let them dry. Now, I did say I would be doing a little bit of sci-fi here for all my friends back on Starsmadas. So let's take a look at this Jaeger class. Now, when you're painting a model, it's, I would say, sometimes a good idea to pick your colors beforehand. I want to have a base of the brightest silver I have. So I'm going to look for the brightest silver paint I have. And I'm going to be using Army Painter paints because I prefer them. They usually go on in about 2 coats. And you can thin it if you want to. Details can be done in 1 or 2 coats. Base coat, usually 2 coats. If you're in a rush, you can do it in 1 coat. You can also paint over wet paint with... if you're very careful, you can actually paint over wet paint with Army Painter, and it won't mix. It will be a thicker coverage, but it does mean you can get that model finished quicker. And I just keep thinking of that Utsume, sorry, that Warhammer comic about this little girl painting a Chaos Marine, and it's so adorable. She's so happy with her very chunky miniature. Alright, so let's see. I think Shining Silver. I do have a bit of Shining Silver left. I'm going to use Shining Silver. Now, if I want to be a bit cheesy, I could add a little bit of blue into this, because it is a Jaeger class and they're silly. But let's start with a base of Shining Silver. So, I'm going to use one of my newer brushes. Let us use the multi-purpose Whiz Kids brush from my Drider kit. I'm going to show you my Drider Mini. Let me introduce y'all to Youngin. This is Youngin, the orphaned paladin of Oth. Not to be confused with Loth. Oth is totally an original, do not steal god. Okay. So I'm going to apply this first coat without thinning it, because frankly, most of my starships that I painted were painted before I really knew how to paint miniatures, and I used dollar store paint, so even if this is thick, it's still probably going to look better than most of the guys I painted. The other thing with Army Painter paints is if you do put too much on, you can just take your brush and move it elsewhere. You can actually kind of... This is ill-advisable, but you can kind of use your model as a palette. And I've done that before, where I put the dollop, and it's just like a giant scoop, like a giant scoop of paint like this. Bleh. And then I use that section of the model as a source of paint for the rest. Now, I would suggest maybe putting that on a part of the model that's not going to be all that visible. For example, this model sits on the table, so I put it on the underside of the saucer section, which is shaped like a spoon for some reason. This music is very relaxing for me, even though it is from a game which, ironically, is not all that relaxing. Well, it starts relaxing. I do like going back to it now and then, and trying to not lose my head as there's like a dinner rush. Now, when I finish this first coat, I am probably going to move on to another model. And hopefully, the paint I put on my palette here will not dry during that time period. And if it does, you can sort of reactivate it by dipping your paintbrush in water. That doesn't always work that well. Another reason I like Army Painter paints is they are water soluble, so you can actually just wash your minis or wash your hands or wash your clothes and the paint goes away. And on that note, I need to take my glasses off because I forgot I do not want paint on my glasses. They are new. So let's go put them over there. Tuck them safe and sound. Now I have a lot of paint here, so I might actually repurpose some of the silver paint on one of these other minis, so I don't waste paint. This kind of leads to very, we'll say, unique paint jobs and pairings, because it's like, I don't want to waste my expensive paints. And it means my models sometimes have unintentional variety. Like, for example, one faction that's green and gold, in my Battletech collection, the shade of gold I use and the shade of silver I use is often different from miniature to miniature. But by batch, they're usually the same. So, like, if it's like a squad, each squad will have maybe the same gold, but across the army, the squads will have different shades of gold. And that is both a nice way of differentiating your models while still making a cohesive-looking army or fleet or team. So you can say, oh, those are the same group. And then you can point, like, this is one big faction. And then you can look at them and go, oh, this is one team. And the reason that happens is usually just because it's like, oh, well, I already had gold from another miniature on the table, so let's just use that one instead of the original shade of gold. These are just some simple economic tricks you can do to make your models look nicer. Now, another trick about the base coat is the base coat. If you are planning on doing 2 layers of base coat, then the base coat, the first base coat, does not need to be perfect. because the second base coat will help correct for the first. Now, I can, for example, see quite a lot of little bits of black poking through on the aft section of the ship. But I would say this base coat for the Jaeger is finished. Look at that! Look at that! Ship made of tinfoil. So, we're still waiting for... I'm going to still let these two guys, Frank and... Oh shoot, what's his name? What number is this guy? Actually, it's partly dry already. So he's Marine number 22. What's Marine number 22's name? His name is Lancer. Okay. So Lancer here, we're going to put him to the side to dry. And let's paint Dusty! Alright. So Dusty here is one of my command units for my Terminid army. Named after cool moths usernames, MothOC, because bugs. So, I am not going to do a base coat on Dusty, because I combined the base with, what was it? With the primer. That being said, I can see a little bit of gap here by this neck, the shoulder area. There's like a little bit of an armor gap where it looks like some of the primer didn't get there properly. I think I'm going to demonstrate how to dry brush, a skill I'm really bad at. But, hey, this is a tutorial, so let's try dry brushing. I'm gonna get this medium craft brush here. It's very stiff. I'm just gonna loosen it up with my fingers. Normally I'd loosen it up with water, but we're dry brushing. Yeah. This just... Whoa! That just shot dust in the air. Look at that. Yeah, see, that's how that speckling gets on the table. So we're gonna do a little bit of a trick here. We're gonna take this brush we were just using. We're gonna dump it in here. Wash it a bit. And you know what? I may as well show you how to dry your brushes. You rotate it. Yeah. You sort of rotate it and then pull away. And that is supposed to give you a point. Now sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I like my brushes flat, in which case I do this. Other times, if I want a quick dry, I just go, I pinch it and pull it out. So we are going to crack this one open. Now Citadel paints are usually thick, but want to be thin. Give them a shake. Let's just pop it open. And we're gonna zoom out for this part. Now I am not good at dry brushing, so there's a good chance I will actually kind of ruin this. Don't breathe the paint dust properly. This room is 90% dust, unfortunately. So I've scooped out a big chunk of paint. I'm just gonna dollop, let's say 3 chunks, onto my palette here. Oof, we're gonna save that brush for later. So I'm gonna take my brush, which is dry. Now you can use brushes like these for this. You can use regular brushes too, but I bought this specifically for dry brushing. Actually, you know what? Because I am teaching Sat how to dry brush, and she doesn't have one of these, she has one of these, we're gonna use this one. I've never used this brush before. Let's use it. So I'm gonna get a bit of this paint on it, and then I'm gonna go up to my palette and just start painting on it until the paint is no longer covering the palette properly. Like it's a bad paint job. It's like, can I show you this without? No, I can't. See, it's thick here, but after about 3 strokes, it became very fine. So we're gonna do that a couple more times. So now there's only a little bit of paint left on this guy. We're gonna pick Dusty up and just brush along the wings like that. Yeah. And we're just, yeah. What happens is this catches the high parts of the model. Now, I'm gonna go back to my brush, and instead of dipping it in the main paint, I'm going to dip it in the thicker stripe that I painted. That way it already starts with less paint. Repeat the process. So the wash, which is one of my favorite things, which I didn't use for years, is good at getting inside the tiny gaps of your model. Dry brushing is the opposite, in my opinion. So you see, this is the wing that hasn't been dry brushed. This is the wing that has. Also, pet de mods. Woo! I hope I did that right. Yes, I did. Pet the mods. Bognasticator has valiantly slain another bot. Now I am going back to the main source of paint here and there, just because it wasn't thick enough. Hey, this doesn't look half that bad. Oh, I accidentally put on too much. It makes it look like her arms have now been splattered with purple blood. And unfortunately, there isn't a good way to go back on this, so I'm just gonna keep going. This is why I don't dry brush very often, because sometimes I screw up and it changes the full texture of the model. But you know what? Sometimes that's just how life works. What did the famous painter say? Barbaras, there are no mistakes, there are only happy accidents. Also, I will note that one of the downsides about reusing the same palette a million times with army painter style paints is sometimes your new paint will activate old paint and then it will suddenly start mixing in unexpected ways. I consider this a bonus because it means I get surprise colors. And who doesn't like surprise colors? Oh no, I'm not, it didn't reactivate. It's just I accidentally put the purple right beside the silver. Whoopsie. Hey, I didn't say I was the best painter. I'm just an experienced painter. I am not someone who's who go online and say, it's pro painted! No, it's not pro painted. It's me painted. Now you can see I'm just kind of like scringling it around in these areas down here that are gaps. That's another thing I don't like about dry brushing, getting in these gaps. But just be wild with that paintbrush. Okay, she looks odd now, but not bad. Alright, so we have, I'm just going to dry brush her face a couple times. We're pretty much done with the dry brushing. Dry brushing is also how you apply highlights, for those who do that, I think. There are different ways to apply highlights. I don't like doing highlights because I have a thing against artificial lighting, and highlights consist of, in my eyes, a form of artificial lighting. You are painting lighting onto a miniature, and I'm not a fan of baked-in lighting. So it's a game. Okay. So, let's do the carapace. Her carapace is black. Now, I'm not letting it dry because I did dry brushing. So it is less likely that the paint is going to mix in a way I don't like, especially because I'm putting black on top of purple. It's going to be fine. I would love to use Army Painter for this because that's the black I like. So, do I have any... I do have some black Army Painter left. So let's make sure we don't put this in the same spot we put all the other stuff, so I'm going to put it over here. And I could use my Army Painter Speed Paint, but I have almost run out of that. And it is also not a paint that Cool Moth username has, so I will refrain from using that for this specific tutorial. Alright, now this brush is still very purple. So we'll just put that in the... Oh dear! In the little brush hot tub. Brush jacuzzi. So, I am going to actually wet my brush first, just because this black looks pretty thick. And then I'm going to brush it a bit on the palette to thin it just a bit. So I got a wet brush, dip, and then wipe to thin down. Now this doesn't really fit on my holder, so I'm going to hold it with my fingers. And basically I'm going to go over the shell with black. I'm using a fine detail brush, which honestly isn't that fine, but it'll do the trick. And I gotta just, because I don't want to have to go back and correct everything and do more dry brushing and stuff, I've got to be very careful not to paint off the carapace. If I do paint off the carapace, not the end of the world. This isn't a contest model. This is literally just a model for my table. Looks like this might need more than one coat. However, I do plan on putting a wash on this, and the wash might take care of any gaps in this coat, so could be good. I do want it to have good coverage, so I am dipping back into my paint supply here on my palette a lot more than I normally would. And I'm also trying not to dip, like, thick. Trying to get just enough paint for the job. Just when it can't seem to get into a gap, get a new dip. Dip, dip, potato chip. Now, I was trying to think of what color should her claws be, because this is a Hydra swarm Tyranid Prime, so their claws are normally black, but since their shell's already black, I didn't want to have a bunch of extra black on it. And wouldn't you know, we've got a bunch of silver here from the starship. So we could just do her claws in silver and go for a little bit of an aliens look. I do want my Tyranids to have a sort of semi-aliens feel. I think Hydra's pretty close. You got some black on there. You've also got, I mean, purple isn't one of Alien's colors, but at the very least it'll make the model easier to see, because I already did a model that was blue and black. I mean, blue and dark gray, and it wasn't really easy to see, so I think keeping it with a nice visible color, because sometimes you might think, oh, I'm going to paint a model black. That's going to look so cool. And then you do, and then you can't see any of the details. And when you put it on a board, all you see is a black blob. And it's like, oh no. So if you're going to paint a model majority black, I would suggest maybe painting it a dark gray, and then using a black wash, or maybe a black dry brush, to sort of simulate the appearance of black without actually it being black. I think if you are good at dry brushing, what you'd want is a base of white, and then dry brush most of it black. So there's a hint of white under it, and then apply a black wash. And I think that will get you a good looking model. Kind of because I watched tutorials on how to paint stormtroopers, and they're like, actually paint your stormtroopers black, and then dry brush white. So you might be able to do the opposite. Alright, so we got that. We need to do these hip bones here. Thick thighs save lives. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect, because if it's hard enough for me to like see the details when I'm holding it right up to my face, chances are no one's gonna really notice it that much at the table. Especially when it's in a giant army of Tyranids. Oh, so much for zooming in. You can't even see what I'm painting. Sorry about that, guys. Can we crank that up a bit? My fire hazard of a bedroom. Actually, fun fact, I actually kill power to most of my room using power bar. A series of power bars. Series of power bars is a terrible sentence, by the way. But like I cut off power to most of the stuff in my room when I'm not in it. Like if I have to leave the house for more than an hour, it's cut power. I don't want this place to burn down, because this mess. Bless this mess. Now, sometimes when I'm painting really hard to get details, like let's say in here, in this this black thigh, I'll do a thicker paint because I intentionally do not want to have to do a second layer. Because doing a second layer increases the chances that I'll make a mistake, and also is just a pain in the neck to do. So sometimes hard to reach areas, I'll just paint once with a thick coat. But here's what Dusty looks like right now. She's coming together nicely. So let's take care of those silver spots. The silver blades. Now, do we have a more finite brush than this one? I think, unfortunately, most of my old brushes have degraded recently, so this might be my most fine brush. So let's paint these claws up silver. These talons. Although I do think her hooves should probably be black. Tyranids' rear legs are usually hooved. Some of them are even cloven hooves. Which is confusing, because cloven hooves and hooved are usually very different things. What time is it? Oh, we're halfway through. That is not good. But I do think we're going to be able to finish Dusty tonight. We'll finish Dusty. We'll probably finish the starship. Unfortunately, I'll try to get Frank done really quick. Actually, we can... No, I can't skip the spaceship. Because this is going on my sci-fi Star Trek Attack with YouTube channel. I can't skip the spaceship, and I can't skip Frank. I don't want to skip Dusty. So we're just going to have to skip the Terminator, I guess. Congratulations, this is now a tutorial on how to paint miniatures quickly. But it is good to paint miniatures in batches, in part because it forces you to let your paint dry, and two, it saves on paint, because like, hey, I'm doing the silver on this. Now, she's got a bunch of these tiny little claws on her wings. What I'm doing is I'm painting them horizontally on one side, then I flip her over and horizontally on the other, and the brush should take care of most of the middle details. Yeah. Now I've got silver paint on my finger. I'm just going to wipe that off. It's a little bit still there, but it'll be fine. Let's paint the spike on her silver. On her tail. I've got a little bit of silver left on this, so I'm gonna kind of almost like pseudo dry brush the pointed tail silver. There we go. That looks nice. I just realized I am painting her nails. Make sure to get those cuticles. Oh, she's looking beautiful for a Tyranid Hive Prime. What are these called? It's a winged Tyranid Prime. That is not a good name. Why can't they have a funky name like Von Ryan Leaper? Named after a movie. Okay, that seems pretty good. Is there any... she's got 3 claws on the back of her feet. Now, if you miss a claw, for example, the back claws, you decide not to paint them, that is cool, that is fine, it is your model, but try to be consistent. So, like, if you're gonna forget a claw, forget the claw on the other side, too. For example, I haven't painted the armor on her lower legs black, but I haven't done it on both, so it should be fine. That being said, I am going to paint her hooves black, so I may as well take care of those 2 pieces of armor right now. Oh, she is looking sad! Look at her, she is ready to rip through some people. Girl power. Just a little bit of paint on that because it's going to be too hard to get in and do details on. Just a bit, enough that when your eye sees it, it kind of auto-corrects for the missing paint by being like, oh, it's a shadow maybe. Alright, now painting the hooves. Appears to be a rough surface, so let's go with a thicker paint job. Then we're going to put her aside to dry, and then we can do a wash on her at the end to show you how a wash works. Now, because we are running out of time, I don't know if I'm going to do a second coat on our Jaeger. I'll have to take a look at it to see how well that silver looks. Okay, she is done. I'm going to set her aside to dry. Fab. I'm just going to do a little... Now, thing about Army Painter paints, dries very quick. Her back is pretty much dry, so I'm just going to do a quick second coat, a very quick and dirty second coat over these chimneys on her back, because that is probably one of the areas I'm going to be picking up the miniature, so the paint might get thinned out over time. I'm picking it up. And because it just looked a bit thin. Alright, so we have now done that. Let's go grab our starship. Now, bare bones starship paint job, you need a base of white or silver. You're gonna want blue, red, and that's really about it. Blue for the warp engines, red for the Bizarre collectors and the impulse engines, and then blue for the deflector dish. You can add a bunch of additional colors too, but we are in a rush. Unfortunately, I do need to add a second layer of silver. So where is the... here we go, the Citadel brush. The flat Citadel brush. We're going to have to put a second layer of silver because that looks a little too shoddy. Here, I'm going to paint half of it with the second coat quickly, just so you can see the difference that it makes when you do a second coat. Now, I made this model by busting a Intrepid glass in half and using a special self-drying epoxy known as green stuff to merge the 2 ships together. And you might be all like, why are you cutting up starships? And it's like, that's literally how they made this model. Sort of. Okay, so let's see. So this side has 2 coats, this side has 1. Maybe if I turn that light off, it'll be easier to see the difference. Okay, you can't really see the difference in the video because this is a bad webcam, but trust... Oh! Evil mode! Trust me, it's better. Now, if I wanted to go for a battle damaged look, I would probably stick to just 1 coat of silver. Now, I'm also, to save time here, only going to apply the second coat to the top and sides. Actually, no, I need to apply a bit to the bottom. That's really bad. Oh, that's the wrong paint. Oh dear, I just mixed some paints by mistake. Well, let's just keep going. Hey, I've made a brighter silver. That's actually really nice. I mixed some of the primer into my silver paint by mistake. And it's created a nice, bright silver paint. I'm just going to use that on the bottom, though. I already did the top. This might... Ooh, nope, it's ruining it. It's ruining the model. Okay, how to fix? I could let it dry and then paint over with silver. But we don't have time! So I'm just gonna mix a lot more silver into this weird concoction I've made. And keep going! Because sometimes that's what you gotta do. Sometimes you just have to keep going. This means it is going to be a thicker paint. It's going to look a little worse. But sometimes you're in a rush. You know, I'm actually glad that I'm making these mistakes in this video because it shows you how to kind of quickly fix mistakes when you're in a pinch. Alright, now I'm going to do my best not to get any of this weird mixture on the top. Because then it kind of has like, ooh, the top has a slightly different color than the bottom. That kind of looks cool. So we're going to have to set that to the side to dry, especially because that's the primer mixed with the paint. And when you mix primer with paint, it changes the drying times. Now, typically, if you mix primer with Army Painter paint, the drying time isn't too bad. But if you mix it with other types of paints, oh, it can extend the drying time of the primer by like as much as like 6 hours. So be careful. Alright, let us move on to Frank, so I can show you how to paint a human. So I put him on there. Now, what we want is a skin tone. I'm going to use this sort of desert sand paint here, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of white. Now, I could use Citadel paint, like this this Wraithbone, which is already kind of a creamy, and you think, oh, mixing these two colors together will be great. Citadel and Army Painter don't always mix, and I don't know how well Citadel mixes with this one. What, Model Color? Model Color is hit or miss. Citadel paint is nice, but takes forever in order to layer. This company is extremely weird. Like, this paint is actually really good. I love it. I want more of it. This paint they make is bad. And the yellow they have is horrendous. The fluorescent yellow they have is horrendous. And the fluorescent blue they had was, I'm not joking, unusable. I eventually just threw it away. It was so bad. So let's put a dollop of this sand here. That's way too much, but alright. I'll live with that. Well, maybe I could reuse that color on my Space Marine. Then we're going to take some white. Ironically, one of the harder paints to come by. Now, I have put them beside each other, but I have not mixed them yet. So let us pick a nice thin brush. Here we go, the fine detail one. Spin it a bit, twist it, do that. I'm going to mix these two by sort of like spiraling between them. And then sort of painting away until I have something resembling a skin tone I want to use. Okay, here we go. Now this is pretty thick. So let's just paint it on the palette until there's a little less of it on our brush. What I'm going to do, I'm going to paint his whole head with this, including his hair. It's still looking not quite right, but that's fine. And then I'm going to paint his hands with this. And you can keep this paint around because you might need it later to do touch-ups. But you're done! His skin. Ta-da! Now you do the face and hands and stuff first because they're the hardest to correct. So what you do is you, like, notice, oh, it's spilt everywhere, right? Look at his hands, they're more like gloves. Well, you paint the clothes over it, and you're good. Alright, so let's soak that. Now, what color should his jacket be? Let's see. I've got some extra red. And we're gonna need the red for the starship. Yeah, we need red and blue for the starship. So let's use red and blue for him. That way we waste less paint. Now I'm probably gonna mix some of this blue with black. Well, maybe not. Alright, we'll get the multi-purpose brush. Clean it off. Let's zoom in a bit. I hope y'all enjoying this little tutorial that is actually about an hour long, which makes it a very long tutorial. I want a darker color, so I'm actually going to take my brush and scoop some of this black paint here and just put it in the corner of this red paint until we get more of a maroon color. Because this is the apocalypse. No one's wearing bright colors. Now, he's a Last of Us mini. Well, a knockoff Last of Us mini. And I have purchased him for a Trench Crusade thing because I wanted a bunch of trench pilgrims to fight the zombie army. And I thought, well, if the trench pilgrims are just a bunch of normal people, then wouldn't it be funny if I just grabbed a bunch of zombie survivors that were like civilians? And that's how I ended up with this. I've also, funnily enough, got some like Firefly soldiers from The Last of Us as well to round out the force. So it's gonna be like this guy leading, this girl leading them in this like decked out Trench Crusade armor, giant sword, cross with megaphones, and then it's just gonna be like a bunch of civilians with jackets and knives and guns. It'll certainly be an interesting thing. Now, I've painted the backpack the same color as his jacket. And you might be thinking, what? But I'm going to try and dry brush over the backpack and not dry brush over the jacket to make them look a little bit different. Now, unfortunately, I've already messed up a bit more on this guy. You know, this isn't Frank. This is Hank. I'm rushing way too much. I am rushing this so much, but I want to be able to show you how to paint miniatures. So, I think this is what's known as slap chop, when you try to paint a miniature as quickly as possible. Thanks, Hank. Okay, now we're gonna use this same marine color for his shoes. Now, I won't go into how to paint bases, but if you're just starting, once all your paint's finished, just paint them black. Or a fancy color you have too much of. Like for me, I had rough iron, and a lot of my Battletech bases are painted rough iron because rough iron was not a paint I was using to paint my minis. So I was all like, I had all this beautiful rough iron. And so I painted all the bases for Inner Sphere factions by default rough iron. Alright, so his boots are done. Let's use black for his hair. Actually, let's mix a little bit of white and black together to see if we can just quickly make gray without actually having to open up any of my gray paints. Again, we're thinking economically here, people. An army painter painting kit is pricey, but I mean, you get great paints. For those who don't have one, if you're looking to get started, look up the Fantastic Starter from Army Painter, and you want just the regular paint one, not the speed paint, not the washes, not the metallics, just the Fantastic Starter. It comes with a practice mini, a brush that I actually never used. I gave that brush to a friend to get her into the hobby. So it comes with a brush, it comes with a wash, it comes with primer, it comes with a lot of stuff you're gonna need. And it comes with a lot of basic colors. So honestly, and it's like 40 to 60 bucks depending on where you get it. Sometimes it's on sale, sometimes it's being price hiked for no reason. I'm just gonna do a little bit of a gray dry wash on this backpack like I was mentioning before. To make it look just a bit different from his backpack. I mean, from his thing. And I'm just gonna try to carefully go over these backpack straps just a bit. That's a bit futile. I'm gonna skip that. Alright, onto his pants. So let's take a bit of this black again, and mix it with this sort of soft blue from the Army Painter set to make jeans. And it has not made a jean color. It has made something else, but we're going to work with it. Made of more of a navy blue than a jean. And this is a bit thick, so I'm just going to thin it by brushing. Now, I did give my strong tone wash away to my friend, because I didn't have a lot of it left, and I had some new washes of my own, and I thought I had enough strong tone wash remaining that they could paint the miniatures I gave them. So I won't be able to show you the strong tone wash, but I'll show you how to use a wash. Now, normally I'd use the wash on Hank. Don't know if we have time to let Hank dry. Now you might have noticed I didn't do anything with his face, and that's because I'm gonna let the wash do the face for me. The faces are what I'm the worst at, by the way, so I really just let the wash handle the face. A lot, and I have a rule, which is if I paint the face and it's wrong, I'll try to fix it, and I can try to fix it up to 3 times. After that, I give up, and it's just whatever's there is the face. Because, oh my gosh, painting faces is difficult. That's where you might want toothpicks. Or, I have a car repair brush, funnily enough. This thing here, this is for touching up mistakes on cars, like scratches. That is sometimes useful, but even then, really hard to get faces. Alright, so here we have a basic paint. Oh. I just forgot one more detail I want to do. I'm gonna paint his weapon here silver. Now I'm going to do a little bit of touch-ups. Now that we've basically finished this, I'm going to go in and correct a few small areas where the paint's bled. So like, oh, there's a spot on his hand that's red. There shouldn't be. Let's touch that up. Or, hey, there's some flesh on his coat. Let's paint that back over with red. That kind of thing. His hair is way too long on the back, and it's coloring his coat, so we're just going to lightly brush a bit of the red over that. Correct it. Now, I could go in. He's got some pouches on here and like backpack straps. I could go in and try to correct these, or like go in very detail. But this is a very basic paint job on how to do someone, so I'm going to stick with this. There are different shades of jeans. I don't know. I never liked jeans. Alright, so we are at the 9:56 minute. We have maybe 10 minutes left. That is just enough time for me to apply a wash to Dusty and show you how to do a wash. Washes are fun because they're dirt simple. Now, I'm going to use a black wash. It would also be appropriate for me to use a... How did I get all this paint on my fingers? Oh, I accidentally dropped the wash bucket in the paint and then picked it up. Oops. Well, my friends, that happens sometimes. And now I've got white smudges on my pants. But these are my sort of house cleaning pants. This is my shirt I wear whenever I paint. That's another thing I probably should have brought up at the beginning when we were talking about how to keep your painting environment clean. Have a painting shirt, have a painting pants, something like that, so you don't... Oop, I just realized an area we can touch up. So you don't make a terrible mess. You do want your fingers to be free of any wet paint, because when you pick up a miniature, you don't want to make it wet. Alright, so we're going to grab a thick brush. I think we're going to grab that Citadel brush that's all fanned here. See how it's very wide? And I just dipped my fingers in the paint again. Ah! Okay, so what I'm going to do actually, because this is all damp, I'm going to invert this. Rip. There we go. So I'm less likely to get more paint on my fingers. I'm going to take this guy. I'm going to take the wash. Now, we can't pour the wash onto our palette, because if we do, it's going to spread everywhere, because washes are very, they lack viscosity. They spread very quickly. And I'm almost out of black wash. I need to buy more. That sucks. Oh man. Do I have anything else I can use? Now you can make washes using, I think, a wash base and then paint. I'm not quite sure. You know what? If you want to make a wash, look up how to make a wash online, because I don't know how. So I'm going to take flesh wash and mix it with this black wash and hope Dusty comes out looking good. Oh boy, this might be a disaster. Or it might be perfect. I'm actually also going to scoop up some of this black paint here. Scoop up some of this black paint that we were using. I'm going to mix it into the wash to try and make it a little bit more darker. Okay, now this is the other thing to let you know. You might want to wear gloves when doing a wash, because the wash will get into your fingernails and dye your fingers, and depending on the wash you use, it's gonna look like you stuck your fingers in something nasty. It might make it look like your fingers are bloody. It might make it look like you just went to the washroom and didn't care to wash your hands. So if you work at a public-facing job like I do, you should probably put on gloves before you put on a wash, because that's gonna be on your fingers for a few days. This is the first time I'm using a glove with a wash, because I feel like I've learned my lesson. And I am so I slap a bit of the wash on, and then I am just spreading it across the surface. Ooh, this is darker than I expected. Now the wash will seek out, locate, and infiltrate those little cracks and crevices that are hard to get to. Okay, I think Dusty might come out looking very xenomorphy, because this wash is stronger than I thought it would be. Now, I could have tried to put on this wash sparingly by just putting a little dollop here and being like, ooh, and spreading it as thin as possible, like that. But I went hardcore on it. And I'm going to commit to the bit. Now, you can spread it with sort of a flat brush, or you can just kind of double it in and just go, and just go crazy with it if you want. Washes also seep into those hard to get areas. They highlight details like the mouth and stuff. I'm not going to avoid the swords. I'm going to put the wash on the swords as well. I mean, the talons. We may as well just do this whole thing up. And yes, I'm doing the wash over the black, because I mentioned that it would help maybe fill in some of those gaps that I missed, and sort of be a pseudo second coat. Now this because it is a mixture of flesh wash, black paint, and a black wash, it actually has a slight brown tinge to it, which ironically means it's going to be pretty close to the strong tone wash that Army Painter supplies in their starter sets, which I do believe is the wash that you have, Cool Moth. Now, if you're doing like zombies, using the right type of flesh wash can actually make your models look real like bloody and nasty and stuff. I think one of the things you have in that starter set I got you is something called blood effects. I haven't looked into it at all, but I think the blood effect is probably like a red wash. That's my guess. The book probably tells you what it is. But it had a cap similar, it had a bottle cap. Army Painter kind of like color coats their caps for certain types of paints. It had a cap that was similar to the cap that the wash had, I think. Alright, so now this model is pretty much completely shiny. Now, it might dry shiny, or it might dry not shiny. I don't think it'll dry shiny. See how glossy it is? Most of my washes don't dry this way. I had a purple wash that did dry this way. It was the wash I put on Youngin. But here you go. So this will dry and it will look shadowy or muddy or dark, dirty. Whatever it looks, it will look fabulous. So here we go. This is Dusty. All right. And just because I owe it to my YouTube channel subscribers, I'm going to very quickly paint the details on our Jaeger. So I'm going to use that busted up brush I mentioned from the beginning. That's kind of solidified into a point. Grab a little bit of red for the Bizarre collectors. Just kind of get it on there. And then the impulse engines are here. Because it is an Intrepid class, I think I might have like a couple. An Intrepid and a... Oh, we need a different brush for this. A mixture of an Intrepid and a Paragon, which I think was the original name for... No, it isn't. An Intrepid and... It's a Maki Raider. A mixture of those two. It might have an additional set of engines. We're gonna just paint the... No, you know what? Let's do this nicely. Let's grab a bit of this yellowy tan color and put it on the maneuvering thrusters. I know it's supposed to be sort of an orange yellow, but we're just gonna work with what we got. And I'm not painting the tops or bottoms, I'm just doing the sides of them. Now, we're going to do the secondary deflector in this color. Alright, that's a navigational deflector, I think? Or is this a secondary? Then we go up to the secondary deflector. Do that black. Now, phaser strips. I've got a little bit of black. I'm going to try and extremely carefully run along this phaser strip so it just catches a bit of the black. There we go. I have it off camera. I'm sorry. We're almost done, folks. We're almost done. You all go to bed soon. Oh, I just tapped my model with black paint. Probably not a good idea. Ooh, I made this phaser strip a bit too dark. You know what I say, if you make a mistake, just repeat it. And it'll look like it's consistent and intentional. Okay, there we go. Phaser strips painted. You can see that. Alright, so now we're going to add the blue. I'm going to use this brush again, because this is very fine detail. I'm going to put just a stripe on the side for the warp engine. It is a bit messy, but I kind of thinned it out to the point where it looks right. Oh, the other thing you want to do is try to get the painting on it symmetrical if you are making up what you're doing. So that there's like, if you got 1.5 centimeters of blue on one side, try to get 1.5 centimeters on the other side. Otherwise, under close inspection, your model's going to look funky. Alright, so now, deflector dish. There's a problem. The Jaeger class doesn't have what looks like a deflector dish. Now, I think technically speaking, this is a deflector dish. So I'm going to take some red and some of that sand color and mix them. I'm gonna just put a dollop here. There we go. Now, I don't apply a wash to my starships. I do apply it to some of my mechs, but there we go. We've got ourselves a Jaeger class. Now, I could add more detail if I want later, but we are out of time for today. So this guy is ready for the tabletop. So yeah, let's just quickly review. A rough priming for your model. Put a base coat, and then if you're painting hands or faces, put those on before you paint the coats. Sometimes you need more than one coat to make a model look good. Small details, though, usually just need one coat. And be generous when applying a wash. And there you go. Oof! I just got more wash on my fingers. That will be all for today. I'm actually just going to put this over here, and we're going to slide this back so you can see the minis. Frank fell over. Frank, stand up. Frank! There we go. Frank! There we go. Look how big Frank... Not Frank. Oh, also be careful when you're moving a model that has wash on it, because if you touch it, the wash can stick to your fingers and be removed from the model. But look at Frank versus Dusty. Frank is tiny. And this is the same scale. Actually, this isn't even the same scale. I think Warhammer is a slightly smaller scale than this guy, meaning that this is actually Dusty's even supposed to be bigger than. That being said, look how big a Space Marine is compared to Frank. That's because Space Marines are basically giants. I think they're supposed to be 8 to 9 feet tall. Alright. Thank you for joining me. You have a wonderful day, wonderful night. Thank you for still being subscribed to my Star Trek channel when I haven't uploaded. I have been I'm just going to fix this little silver here. I have been in a great amount of debate over what video to make next. I have a couple in the works. What else is it? I'm going to be doing a Trench Crusade video and maybe some Warhammer videos. That being said, I don't want to completely neglect my Star Trek fans, which is why, yeah. Anyway, bye everyone. For real this time. Night.